This episode is brought to you by the Slash and Cast Podcast Network. There are legends around here.
Who died and made you fucking king of the zombies?
Even if only in their own minds. Forgotten, but not yet dead.
I want to play a game.
Some have tried to stop them, but they keep coming back.
Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out.
Coming to entertain you. They are the Crystal Lake Soldiers.
Welcome back. You are listening to the Crystal Lake Soldiers podcast. My name's Isaiah. I am actually joined this week. We're going to try something different here. I've got my girlfriend, Christy, here, who is actually kind of newer to watching horror movies. And we're still talking about the Halloween series, and we're doing our Halloween Retrospective series leading up to the release of Halloween Kills, which actually comes out this Thursday night. And so we've covered everything up through the Rob Zombie double feature of Halloween from 2007 and Halloween 2 from 2009. And we are going back. And what we're talking about today is the Halloween sequel from 2018, directed by David Gordon Green, which is a direct sequel to the original Halloween made by John Carpenter. So how are you doing, Christy?
Oh, fine. No promises for anybody listening to this, and I wholeheartedly apologize.
So, just to kind of get started here before we actually get into talking about the movie, kind of give us a little background of like the horror movies you've actually watched before meeting me.
Oh, gosh. Well, the friends group that I hung out with didn't want to watch horror movies, and when we did, it was like Scary Movie or those, stupid jump scare ones that don't really are more funny than scary. But I remember watching The Conjuring. I've seen oh my gosh, I always forget the name of it, but the guy wears the little like hood on his head that makes no sense for people. That probably is a bajillion ones of these not partners.
Strangers?
There you go. That's the one. And then Girl on the Train, I think, was the last one that I saw.
That was what's her name? Emily
Blunt, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm also terrible with movie names. I've probably seen more and I just don't remember.
That's fine. So, needless to say, just to kind of bring that up, that your kind of experience and knowledge with horror is a little limited, to say the least.
Limited? I would say it's 0.
All right. So I bring that all up because we went into Halloween basically fresh with her. So we did start out with the original Halloween and kind of give just kind of a recap of what you thought of the original Halloween.
I thought it was so boring. I understand the premise of where it came from in the 1970s and how it was this whole new vibe. And I get that and I understand that deep down. But while I was watching it, I got bored. It wasn't enough action for me. But this one, the 2018 one, definitely helped with that and actually made it more interesting.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, and so we'll get into that here now. So why don't we go ahead and not waste any more time, and let's get right into it and talking about 2018's Halloween.
Testing 1, 2, 3. We're on.
We're here to investigate a patient that killed 3 innocent teenagers on a Halloween in 1978. He was shot by his own psychiatrist and taken into custody that night, and has spent the last 40 years in captivity. Hello, Michael. I have something you might like to see.
Everyone in my family, like, turns into a nutcase this time of year. Yeah, I mean, your grandmother is Laurie Strode. She was almost murdered.
Wasn't it her brother who murdered all those babysitters?
No, it was not her brother. That's something that people made up.
Do you know that I pray every night that he would escape?
What the hell did you do that for?
So I can kill him.
Dad, look out!
The bus crashed.
Mom, what bus crash?
Michael escaped.
Excuse me, somebody's in here.
Hello?
He's waited for this night. He's waited for me. I've waited for him.
Get out the room! Get inside!
You don't believe in the boogeyman?
He's here!
You should.
Can you close the closet door?
All right, so Halloween was released on October 19th, 2018. It was directed by David Gordon Green, who often works with Danny McBride. They're definitely more comedy-oriented with what they typically do. So this is definitely something that kind of caught people off guard, that somebody from kind of the comedy world was coming over to write and direct a Halloween movie, especially with Danny McBride, because everybody knows Danny McBride. And I mean, it's just kind of the whole, just the whole comedy aspect kind of just threw people a lot with this. So it was very interesting having that duo write this story and then him directing it. But for cast, obviously we've got Jamie Lee Curtis, who's returning to the series after Halloween H2O and Halloween Resurrection, which we won't talk about Resurrection anymore because that's the worst movie in this fucking series. But we also have Judy Greer, who's also kind of more or less in a lot more comedy things than you would see in like drama or horror. But we've also got James Jude Courtney, who is playing the Shape in this, or Michael Myers. And then we have Andi Matichak, who is actually, this is her first role, and she was introduced into this movie because they wanted to go with somebody that was more or lesser known, kind of like what they did with the original Halloween when casting like Jamie Lee Curtis, because that was her first movie. So that was kind of a nice little throwback that they decided to do there, and do somebody that was a little bit more unknown for kind of that main role with all this. And then to kind of round out the cast, we've got Will Patton, who plays a deputy in this movie. So it was very interesting to see Will Patton in this movie because he's been in so many movies I like Remember the Titans and different things like that. So having him in this movie was a great catch, especially just he's a phenomenal actor, number one. So so the budget for this movie, this movie only had a budget of $10 million. Okay. And it went to gross over $255 million worldwide.
Isn't it the highest grossing one of all the films, or did I read that?
No, it is definitely the highest grossing Halloween movie ever by a large margin. But then also, on top of that, there was, let me find my note on this as well. It had also the biggest horror movie opening with a female lead, number one. Biggest movie opening with a female lead over 55. And biggest opening for any Halloween films. And it was also the second biggest horror movie opening ever after It from 2017.
That makes sense.
And it was also the second biggest October opening ever after Venom. So the first Venom movie. So It did very well, and in comparison to some of the Halloween movies where it only grossed like $35 million total, I mean that's a lot more money that this fucking movie made. So it's definitely it definitely had a lot going into it, just with the return of Jamie Lee Curtis into the role that she became synonymous with, but also you have John Carpenter coming back to produce the movie, because obviously he directed the original and produced the second movie, and he also came back with his son and their composing partner to do the music for the movie, which is a huge thing too, because it's been a while since he's done music for a movie too, because typically he would do the music for his own movies, so that was kind of huge for him to come back for that as well. So yeah, so to recap for the kind of the different storylines we have going on here, just to kind of see where we've came from to where we are currently. So, and I've done this a few times over the last how many ever episodes. So you have the first Halloween movie and Halloween 2. That was originally supposed to be the end of the Michael Myers storyline, ultimately, because at the end, both Dr. Loomis and Michael Myers were supposed to perish in the fire that happened at the end of Halloween 2. Okay? So then Halloween 3 happened. We all know that that's a separate storyline altogether, had nothing to do with Michael Myers. So that's its own little thing. Then we come back for Halloween 4, 5, and 6, and that's the Thorn Trilogy, which continues after Halloween 2, and it's 10 years after the events of that movie. And Michael Myers is in a coma after the explosion at the hospital, and Loomis is somehow still alive, even though he was in the same fucking blast, and somehow is not in a coma or as badly scarred as Michael is, even though he was in the same fucking room. Anyways, so 4, 5, and 6 happens. Obviously, 6 being as abysmal as it was, that ended that storyline because it got too convoluted and too much going on with the story. So we have Halloween H2O that happened that basically ignores everything that 4, 5, and 6 set up and just is a direct sequel from Halloween 2. And that brought back Jamie Lee Curtis the first time and saw her basically fake her own death and start a new life in California and raising a son and complete basket case and all that, just with everything that happened. Then Michael comes back and finds her, and then we have Halloween Resurrection, which is the web stream, because it was early 2000s, so that was the big thing, is, you know, the whole not only the reality TV thing was a huge craze at the time, but also, you know, streaming on the web and stuff. So they did the whole Dangertainment webcast of, you know, this reality show of all these people trying to explore Michael Myers' house, and he comes back home and kills everybody basically in there. And you've got Busta Rhymes in the movie.
Which makes zero sense to me when you explained that to me the first time. It's just like, okay, we'll just throw this person in there.
Yeah. It was kind of at the time, let's see who we can throw in the movie and get some notoriety to get people to see the movie. Yeah. I mean, the best thing that came out of there was him yelling "trick or treat, motherfucker" at the end. And
I mean, all they could have said was from the movie Freaky Friday, because that's where I know Jamie Lee Curtis from initially, and you would have gotten a whole generation of millennials to go see this movie. But that's just my opinion on that one.
Yeah. I mean, it could have worked. It could have worked. So we had Resurrection happen, and that obviously was abysmal as well, just like Part 6, so they decided not to continue that as well. So then we have the remake double feature that Rob Zombie did with Halloween, and he kind of followed the formula of the first movie, basically, and like the second half of the movie basically remade that movie, but the first half kind of focused on Michael in the insane asylum in the 15 years or whatever it was leading up to him escaping. And then his Halloween 2 completely went fucking the opposite direction and just was completely weird and fucking different. And I know that's hated by a lot of people. And I don't hate the movie as much as I used to, like I explained in that episode. But at the same time, it's just kind of like, what the fuck did you do to this character? I mean, making him look like number one, like the Phantom of the Opera, with his mask like ripped in half, and then making him look like a hobo at the same time, because it's basically homeless Michael Myers with his huge ass beard and this long fucking hair, and just dirty and grimy, and wearing this nasty ass mask, and him talking at the end, because Michael Myers doesn't talk. Number one, that fucking still pisses me off that they made him talk at the end of the movie. So, but that's kind of where that ended, and they were gonna make a sequel off of that, but make it more of a John Carpenter type Halloween movie. That never happened. And then we got this 2018's Halloween. David Gordon Green and Danny McBride took over. They wanted to simplify it, so they knocked out every other sequel. Nothing matters other than the original movie, and so a lot of the storylines that established in, even the second movie, that's gone. I know that pissed a lot of people off with that, but they just wanted to keep it simple, just a random killer going after random people on Halloween night. And that in itself was scary, and that's what they found scary about it. So they wanted to get back to the basics. So I like that they went that route. I know a lot of people are still mad that they eliminated a lot of the story between Michael and Laurie that was established, but I just think I do think it's more scary having that this random person is just coming after me that I don't know. So that's where this came into play, and that's where we start off. We start off 40 years later, and basically Michael's about to be transferred from Smith's Grove to this new facility that's been set up, and we've got this podcasting team coming in to try to interview Michael and just interview different people that kind of were involved in the 1978 murders, and we kind of, that's where our story is established, because one of the podcasters was able to get from the Attorney General's the mask that he wore in the 1978 murders. And so he brings that, and you can see that Michael senses that the mask is there, and that's kind of where we get started here. So just off of watching the 78 one, and just even from that first scene that we watched in the 2018 one, what was your kind of thoughts seeing that?
Well, in the 2018 one, my first thought was that looks like the most boring game of Foursquare in my entire life. Because they're so spread apart, and they're attached to all the chains and basically a cement block. But I think it did a better job of at least kind of introducing the theme of the film, because I think that was the one thing that bothered me about the original one, going into it not knowing anything about it, was, okay, yeah, the kid killed his sister, but can we get some more explanation why, other than he's a madman? But this actually showed that he's more than just this random person that kills people. Like, you can see it's deep down within him, because it affects everyone around him, that he senses that the mask is within feet of his possession, and it kind of shows, and everybody else reacts to that with him not reacting, which makes a bigger impact than I think the opening scene of the original one did.
I'd never even really thought about that, just him not reacting, and just kind of everybody else reacting around him because of whatever kind of energy's radiating off of him, and just kind of whatever energy he's letting off. That makes a lot of sense, honestly, just because he's just like the embodiment of fucking evil. And
what was interesting too is, while I forget the male podcaster's name, but he was holding the mask, the female looked back at, what's the doctor's name in this one? That's not Lucas.
Dr. Sartain.
She looks back at him, and he kind of gives her this reassuring, no, it's okay. Look, and I'm, it's the first time I watched it, I'm like, well, that's interesting. Why isn't he having the same reaction as all the other people that are in this scene? And he's just standing there like it's an okay thing. And so that to me was interesting. But the fact that the two podcasts were like, we're freaking out, internally, and you could see that on their faces, and then it's just everything else is just silent for him.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. And then, obviously we end that scene, and it builds up, and it gets pretty chaotic. To him, I think the podcaster's name is Aaron, I think is what his name was.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was. I could be wrong. I mean, it's so forgettable just because they're in there for such a short amount of time. But he's basically yelling just for him for Michael to say something, and then it just cuts to the Halloween theme, and we get probably the coolest opening that Halloween has ever done, with the pumpkin, the reverse pumpkin with it, basically starting out moldy and just totally decayed, and then it just grows back into its original glory, and it's the same pumpkin from the original movie, which I fucking loved, with the same cutouts and everything. It was absolutely perfect. Basically, Halloween coming back from the dead, in essence, is what it was like. And I liked how they did that, because they basically filmed that over a few-week period. They started out with the pumpkin cutout and everything, and then they just had a camera on it and just watched it decay, and then they just reversed that footage, and it was fucking effective.
Yeah, and I thought it was totally CGI when I saw that, and then when you said that it was, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Which is so funny how something so basic can seem so cool when we have all this technology. It's just like, oh, it's literally a pumpkin rotting and you put it in reverse. Cool. Love it. Love the basic.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, so one of the cool things is with this movie is they do a lot of callbacks, even though they eliminated all the story elements from all the other movies other than the first one. They do a lot of callbacks to some of the older movies. You have things like when you see the scene of the kids trick-or-treating, you can see, one's wearing a skeleton mask, a witch mask, and a pumpkin mask, which is a callback to Halloween 3 with the silver shamrock masks. So they're exact replicas of those masks, so that's a nice little callback. You've also got a newscaster calling the murders from 1978 as the babysitter murders, which is actually what the original name of the movie was supposed to be before the producer, Erwin Yablans, decided he wanted to make the movie centered around Halloween. And so that's where the Halloween name ended up coming from. Otherwise, it was just going to be called the Babysitter Murders, which would have been interesting.
That sounds like, like the Babysitters Club. It just sounds like a bad version of that.
Yeah. So having that producer basically say, let's make this centered around Halloween, I mean, that kind of set the stage for everything, because they basically had kind of the basic script set, and that just kind of pushed it over the edge and ultimately became what we know today. So I mentioned how Laurie's granddaughter, Allison, was kind of a coveted role, and how they wanted to have somebody unknown play the role. But you had people like Lucy Hale and Emma Roberts meet with producers to try to get that role before they were like, no, we're going to go with somebody that's unknown to play this, kind of trying to play homage to the original movie with how they did that, with they cast basically an unknown character for that lead role. So I thought that was kind of a cool little touch that they did with that. We'd already talked about how it was like the highest grossing Halloween movie of all time. I mean, this movie, it came out at such the perfect time, because enough time passed where everybody got the bad taste out of their mouths from the Rob Zombie Halloween 2, and just because that did not go over well at all. And it was just kind of at that point, because we hadn't seen anything from, the Friday the 13th franchise since 2009. We hadn't seen anything from the Nightmare on Elm Street series since 2010 either. So it was kind of about time that we see something from one of these big franchises again, because obviously we've had other things created. We've had the Conjuring series come about. We've had the Saw series basically just end, and because they did the Jigsaw movie at that point, and that was kind of the end of that. So to have something from a major franchise come back around that time was perfect. So it was kind of the perfect storm, with people wanting more of something that they can relate to when it comes to horror. And because I mean, yes, it's always better if they can do something original. It's just with horror, it just seems like people bitch no matter what you do. So people will bitch when you do something new because it's not something they know, but then they also want stuff that's original too. And it's like you can't please everybody, but this ended up pleasing a majority of people with what they did with this movie. So,
which is so interesting to me because as a person who didn't really watch horror movies, I had no idea this movie even came out. Like, I was completely oblivious. I think there was a Marvel movie that came out that same year that I was probably paying more attention to. So, you know, hearing all this stuff now after, it's like, where was I? Was I under a rock? Like,
yeah.
Like, all this stuff happened is now I'm catching up to it. It's like, oh, I probably would have enjoyed that if I watched it, you know, 4 years ago, however many years ago it came out now. But, so every time I hear that, like all these series and things, I'm like, oh, I missed a lot.
Yeah. Definitely. It came out at the right time, and obviously we've got 2 other movies coming out now, with Halloween Kills coming out this week, and then next year Halloween Ends coming out, which is supposed to end this storyline and supposedly end the storyline between Michael Myers and Laurie Strode. So we'll see, because it seems like things get rebooted all the time, and maybe they'll go a different direction finally and do something great with it. Who knows? So that remains to be seen. So kind of back to the movie here. So we had that establishing shot with him in Smith's Grove, and then setting the stage for the kind of the narrative with him being transferred to a new facility. And, you know, this is 40 years later, 40 years almost to the day later that he was being transferred. And because he's been there for so long, and they're getting ready to shut down the place. Because Smith's Grove is just basically, it seems like they're portraying it as being kind of the rundown old facility, and they've got this new high-tech facility that they're transferring patients to.
And the reasoning why was that the government had enough of him or something, and they were done exploring him, quote unquote, and they were trying to get rid of him. And I just think that they were trying to get the doctor not to spend any more money on him.
Which is understandable. I mean, you spend 40 years trying to evaluate a patient, and at some point it's got to be like, okay, he's just insane, you know, and there's just nothing more to it. So we've got that story established. Then we end up meeting up with the podcasters again as they're trying to meet up with Laurie Strode. And I love what they did with the portrayal of Laurie in this movie versus what they did in like H2O. Because H2O, they made her kind of the drunk, but headmistress, just kind of hiding her past. But she's still kind of a basket case because anytime, you know, the Halloween date comes around, she basically goes nuts and goes into hiding with her, and basically tries to make her son not go out and do anything and be a teenager. So that's how they portrayed her in kind of H2O, whereas in this one, she was completely traumatized. I mean, just from right after everything that happened, and she had failed marriages, still kind of the drunk persona with that, but at the same time, she kind of turned into this doomsday prepper kind of woman where she was always preparing for him to come back, or always preparing for the worst. Trained her daughter, you know, to basically defend herself, and, you know, set up her whole house as a fucking trap, you know, over the years. And that kind of, and then she had her daughter taken away and everything, and that whole story. So it just seemed like there was a lot more depth with her character in this one versus H2O, with her just being a bitchy drunk.
It was more of a realistic representation of somebody who maybe went through some sort of abuse or trauma. Mm-hmm. Especially when she's sitting there speaking about it in the interview. You know, she's sitting there with her arms crossed. She's stoic, not really having any sort of
reaction.
Exactly. And so I feel like that gave a more real idea of like what she went through as a person and as a character, because you can see that reaction too in the podcasters, because, you know, they're trying to pull information out that they already know, and she's like, you know that, why are you asking me that question? Like, you're done. You know, give me my money and get out of here. Though I did laugh to myself because the way she pulls the chair up when they're starting the interview, and she kind of sits down and crosses her arms, the way I think I wrote down, what did I write down? The way that she did that was how I felt after a meeting that should have been an email. Just like, okay, let's get this over with. And this could have been done way faster if you had just like texted me versus spending an hour and a half trying to describe this one thing to me. But I thought it was very poignant too when at the end of that, when she asked them to leave, she asked for her payment and she just looks out, doesn't even look at them and just stares out the door, because in my brain, she's always watching. So she let these people in and now she's just being careful by looking out the window and still always watching, even though she's not watching.
That's a good observation too. And yeah, like you said, it is like the perfect representation of somebody that went through some major horrific trauma. And I think that they nailed it when it came to that, kind of the storyline aspect with her character. And I thought it was like the perfect kind of growth for her character and just everything she went through in the original movie and everything. So yeah, kudos to the writers on that, because they really portrayed how somebody would probably really react when it came to trauma like that. So we meet Jamie and we see where she is 40 years later, and then we obviously heard through it there about her daughter being taken away. So then we meet the daughter, her husband, and the granddaughter, Allison, who's kind of the main character in this movie now. And they seem like the atypical family, I guess you could say. I guess in a way. And, they're getting ready for Halloween. They're talking about this dinner that they're having because she's...
Join the Honor Society.
Yep, joining the Honor Society and everything. And they're going to finally meet Cameron, her boyfriend, and all that. And so they're kind of setting the stage for that whole aspect of things. And then we follow Allison. Well, before we get to that, we get a little bit of a tidbit about how, Allison's basically asking her mom, have you talked to my grandmother about, joining us for dinner and all that? And basically she lies to her and says that she can't come and all this, and she talked to her already, when she really hasn't, because there's that whole broken relationship, which is understandable. I mean, anytime you have a parent that, in essence, it was ultimately almost like abuse. There's that strained relationship there, and it's understandable that she doesn't want her daughter to be kind of around that toxic relationship.
Well, and Allison doesn't know that either.
Right.
She wants this relationship with her grandmother and just is striving to have that connection, like any grandchild would. And her mom is basically, again, lying to her and kind of refusing it, but not giving an underlying background of why it's not a good idea or why it's a bad idea to speak with her and talk to her and be around her and things like that, because she doesn't know about any of that childhood stuff. And so she wants to save her from that and shelter her by just being like, oh, nope, she didn't. Yeah, no, she's not coming. And, it's like, no, okay, fine. You're going to have a rebellious teenager in about 5 seconds.
Right. Yep. So that all happens, and you can tell that basically Allison knows that her mom is lying. And so she leaves, and then she meets up with her friends, and they're walking to school talking about basically what kind of happened there, and how Allison basically knows that her mom is lying to her about her grandmother. And they bring up the tidbit about, Michael Myers, because the one dude asked, Dave asked, wasn't it her brother that did it? And they were like, no, that was just something people said to, I don't know, make more of the story or whatever it is. Because that was obviously the tie back for the original Halloween series, that Laurie was Michael's sister. And so that was kind of a little nod to that. And just, I know that pissed a lot of people off too. It was just that.
Oh, I thought that was funny. I personally thought it was funny when they said that, only because I also think that the guy who's playing Dave looks like a Midwest off-brand version of like Bill Hader or Stefan because of with his hair and the beanie. Anyway, that was totally random tangent my brain went to every time I've watched the movie. Now I'm just like, that's a Bill Hader. But no, that part actually made me chuckle because it flashed back to that part because my brain actually remembered
right
that, and it was like, aha, connection.
Yeah. And one thing I do give this movie is how it really makes it feel like it's Halloween time, because a lot of the movies, even like the first one, just because of
like
when
California in like the summertime because everything's green. It's just like, no.
Yeah, and you know they did with what they could back then. I mean, they had the fake leaves and whatnot, which actually looked effective, you know, for what it was, especially at nighttime, because it looked more like fall at night. Obviously, because of the fake leaves and stuff, but also because you couldn't see the green.
Couldn't see the green.
You know, but this they filmed it at the right time. They filmed it in South Carolina this time for this movie, and where they chose to film it, it looks like the Midwest, honestly, and it looks really good. It looks like it's Halloween time. It's kind of got that brown tinge to everything, with how they did the color correction and just everything being wet, or, you know, just the leaves all over the place. Whatever they did, because I know I don't remember exactly when they filmed it. I don't remember if it was spring or summer, but they did a good job of making it look like fall, ultimately. Whereas a lot of times the Halloween movies don't quite get that right.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, so kudos on them for that. Then we end up meeting at the high school, Allison's boyfriend Cameron, and they're talking about their Halloween costume with their friends. And so we get the whole friend group established ultimately there, and we kind of go from there. We get this classroom scene where Allison is basically sitting in the same place that Laurie was sitting back in the original movie.
I liked that. I liked that tableau of that a lot.
Yep.
As a person, again, who's not really seen the movie that many times or anything else with the series, that was a nice tie back. Because then my brain went, oh, hey, that's the same chair.
Yep. And a nice other little tie back with that scene, too, is the teacher that's talking is actually PJ Souls, who played Linda in the first movie.
I like that too, yeah.
So that was a nice little tie back, too, that they did with that scene. Even though you don't see her, you hear her voice and everything, which is really cool that they brought her back in some way to be a part of this. Because we had talked previously about how they were talking about bringing her back in one of the other movies, and she just didn't end up doing it. So, and I think it was for the Rob Zombie ones, I think is what it was. I could be wrong. It's been a long few months doing these movies, so. And
I couldn't tell you because I have no idea.
Right. Exactly.
I'm no help.
So we got that little, and then we get that little throwback, and then we see Laurie standing out where Michael was standing, basically. And then Allison seeing her and going out there to meet her grandmother and talking to her about what happened in that morning with her mom lying to her and everything, and basically telling Laurie that she needs to get over Michael Myers because she knows that, you know, he's being transferred and everything. And she basically just tells him, you know, he's being transferred. You need to get over it and move on with your life. Yep. And
which, if you've ever tried to tell somebody who's been through a traumatic event to move on and get over it, you're not going to get very far at all. So her reaction to that, I felt, was very appropriate. And I think ended the scene on a really nice button with her just kind of turning around and walking away. I thought that was really nice.
Yep. But she ended up giving her the money that the podcasters gave her, the $3,000.
If my grandparents were still alive and they gave me $3,000, I'd be like, okay, thank you. I wouldn't question the money.
Yeah.
Also, you're a teenager. Take any money that you can get.
Right. So then, you know, we kind of move forward, and we get kind of the scene where Michael's being loaded up into the bus to be taken away with other prisoners. And we see Dr. Sartain actually get onto the bus, too, because he wants to make sure that Michael gets to where he needs to go. Mm-hmm. So that all happens, and we end up getting a scene with this father and son as they're driving, and they're talking about, and the son's talking about how he wants to go to dance
class. He's like, I want to do a dance class, Dad. I like hunting. I like shooting with you. Like, can we do it on the weekends? And I'm like, I feel that in my soul.
And so that was funny. Like this movie, I feel has a good amount of comedy in it, and I like where they put the comedy in this. I know some people kind of thought it was a little jarring at times, but I thought it was great just because it kind of brought some levity.
exactly,
to everything.
Exactly. You need to break up because of where the storyline comes from and because of how deeply invested fans are with it. You need to have some brevity just to allow, again, people who've never seen it, like myself, to be engaged in the film. Because if you're just going, and you have all these tropes that were done, the past 40 years, I'm not going to care as a person who comes into it. But the fact that it's broken up a little bit with that comedic timing, it makes it more enjoyable because your brain then kind of resets itself and is then prepared for the scare that's about to happen.
Yep.
In about, a minute after that discussion with the
right.
about the dancing.
Yep. So that they have that little chat there, and then they come across the patients that are wandering in the road.
Come across, I think is a nice term for it. Hit or smash is more probably
almost. So they come across the bus that's crashed now, and it's a nice throwback to the first movie with the patients kind of wandering the field.
Yeah.
By the hospital when Michael escapes the first time. So it's only appropriate that when he escapes this time, more patients are wandering around and kind of scattered across the road in the fields or surrounding the crash. So the dad decides to get out and check out what's going on, and then tells his son to call 911 to get people out there. So he calls 911 and ends up going out to look for his dad because his dad is disappeared at this point. And comes across a cop who's... By
the way, he's holding a BB gun or a little shotgun. So it's just like this kid knew he had to grab a gun to get out of it. So it's like, smart. Also ties back to, the whole shooting thing with his dad. So
yep. So he's got his gun and he's walking around and he comes across this cop laying face down in the ditch.
Was it the driver? Or was it one of the security guards? I couldn't tell which one it was.
It was one or the other. I mean, I don't think it really matters. It was a bloody ass.
Matters to my brain.
It was a bloody ass security guy laying in the ditch, and he's basically telling the kid to run. And then he ends up going to the bus, still looking for his dad. Ends up shooting Dr. Sartain, who's like, "Don't shoot!"
Which I thought was funny, and then the kid just runs away, going, "Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit!"
Runs away and gets back into the car. And this is where I was not expecting this. They fucking kill a kid in this movie.
Yeah.
Because Michael's sitting in the back seat of this Bronco or whatever it is, whatever vehicle it is, and the kid starts up the car to try to leave, and Michael comes up and just
smashes his head.
Yeah.
That and the crack of his neck. It's like, okay, all right. That's
so
where we're going.
They went there,
yeah.
And usually that's a no-no for most horror movies to kill any child,
even if they're a teenager. Yeah, like it's just,
it's just like, oh, that's rough. That's rough to take in. So they went there and they did that, and that's how Michael gets his escape vehicle and ends up leaving then. And, we get to basically Halloween Day, and Michael shows up at a gas station, and the podcasters are there. And Michael obviously notices that the podcasters are there.
Well, the way that they framed that scene is that they had pulled up to get gas, and Dana, the female podcaster, is in the back seat looking at all of their trinkets and things and all the different evidence that they have, and Aaron's filling up the tank, and while he's filling up the tank, that you just see the car that Michael's in drive by, and he's like the shadow in the background, and it plays into that, oh, they don't notice it, we're not supposed to notice it either, and then all of a sudden it kind of like focuses on him walking into
and you just see the all-white outfit that he's wearing. And what I like is that this gas station that they have is almost an homage to Halloween 4 with the gas station that they had in there. It basically looks exactly the same like that. So they built this gas station to kind of look like the Halloween 4 gas station, which I thought was kind of cool. And even right down to the ice box that's outside of it. And so we established that Michael's walking in there, and at that point you notice it's him, and it's like, oh shit, something's about to go down here.
But this also isn't the first time that Michael watched them, because they went to the cemetery to go to Judas'
that's right,
headstone, and the podcasters are leaning down, and then there's a shot of Michael standing behind a tree, and whoever the caretaker of the cemetery is, she turns her head, and he's just standing there staring at them. So like he's been following them for a while, before he actually entangles with them at the gas station.
Yep. So Dana decides, she needs to go to the bathroom, so she ends up going to this nasty-ass bathroom.
You mean the loo?
The loo?
The loo. I'm like, she's like, can you go to the loo? And the guy's like, what? And she's like, oh, the bathroom. I'm like, girl, how you've been in the U.S. probably longer than most people have. You know it's called the bathroom. Like, don't be this pretentious little fucked up bitch and like call it the loo. Like you're in Midwest America. No one's gonna know what the hell you're talking about. That just made me like a little like. Oh, how dare she like be proper,
right?
And British. We broke up with you in 1776. Leave us alone.
I love it. So Dana goes to the bathroom, and it's a pretty nasty place, and that's pretty gross. And then, so the other guy, the other podcaster guy, Aaron, is going in and trying to find somebody.
He's trying to pay for gas.
Pay for gas. And he sees somebody kind of with their head laying on the desk. Well, it's revealed the guy's jaw's been basically ripped open because it was smashed against the fucking counter. But Aaron doesn't see that, and so he walks into the garage to try to find somebody. And he sees the guy undressed.
In his tighty whities.
And he's in his tighty whities and tank top, laying there just bloodied and realizing, oh, shit. While all this is happening, Michael's already walked into the bathroom.
Dana's just kind of sitting oblivious on the toilet, and she had gone through and knocked on each stall before getting in the last one, which was quote unquote the cleanest one. And then Michael's doing the same thing, but obviously more menacing.
Yeah.
Than her.
Yep. He walks up to the last one and just kind of stands there for a minute, and then starts shaking the door, and he's like, "Oh, it's occupied." Well, he reaches over with his hand and just drops the fucking teeth on the ground.
And she's just like, what is this? And then she realizes, and then, like, I don't know why she had not yet stood up earlier to pull her pants back up, but, like, that's the moment she decided it was time to pull her pants up and crawl on the floor, which I think was her first mistake, was crawling on the floor.
Yeah.
She made many errors in where she could have easily escaped and just chose not to.
I mean, honestly, though, that was kind of her only course of action because Michael, at that point, had busted through the door.
I always thought he busted through because they changed the camera angle to her on the ground. I thought he busted it after she started crawling.
Yeah, no, he busted through, and then she instantly went under.
Oh, I missed that.
And then kept crawling through, and
screaming, yelling, and that's when Aaron shows up and just goes with a crowbar, I believe, and just says Michael, and then Michael starts attacking Aaron. He drops the crowbar and is smacking him against the wall or
the wall,
mirror,
yeah,
sink, all the things in the bathroom that he could be injured with. And then Dana, I mean, she's so scared out of her mind that she can't move. Well, she grabs the crowbar and tries to smack Michael. That obviously didn't work.
No, and she gets choked.
And like Aaron's so bloody, like he just dies while he's leaning up against a wall, blood running out of his mouth. And she gets choked to death, and just you to watch her feet.
And which is iconic Halloween there. Just Michael lifting somebody up and choking them, or stabbing them on something on the wall or something, and seeing their feet twitch until they just stop. Yeah. But then we get one of the most iconic shots in this whole movie, which is him finally getting the mask back. So he's got the coveralls already on from the mechanic he killed. Then he puts on that mask, and that's just when shit is about to get real. And so
yeah, they framed that nicely with how it slowly came up out of the trunk. And I think you had said that when it originally was in theaters, people like lost their shit during that point. And I'm just like, oh, I can see why.
Yep. So then, because we kind of established how, in the movie, rather, it was established how basically Karen is throwing off like, this is, nothing bad is going to happen. Yeah. Kind of an attitude. Well, shit goes bad, obviously, because Michael's back in town and whatnot, and Jamie's or Laurie rather, is constantly telling her that she needs to be prepared, you know, and prepare for the worst. And because we get the reveal over the radio that Michael Myers has escaped and the bus crashed and whatnot, and Laurie goes into instant hunt mode, and basically saying that we need to hunt him down. And she shows up at Karen's house.
Well, she shows up at the gas station first.
That's
because
right.
She's standing there with behind the caution tape, and that's when Hawkins sees her, and that's when they have a whole conversation of he's back, and that's where she's like, we have to hunt him down. But I forget the other cowboy hat wearing.
That was the sheriff.
Or is it whatever? Deputy Hawkins. The sheriff guy is just like, it's Halloween. What are we gonna do? Cancel it? It's just like, you're gonna regret saying that, dude. But it was there that Hawkins revealed that I was there that night. So like he and Laurie go all the way back, and so he understands her want to get this guy, and he also has that same want and need. And so it was after that moment that Laurie goes back to her house and starts practicing and shooting and doing all that stuff, and then shows up at Karen's. In a very Laurie way of, giving her daughter basically a practice round of someone breaking into her house.
Because Karen shows up with fucking groceries and nobody's there. Back door's open, and she sets the groceries down, and then Ray walks in. And they're walking towards the steps, and then Laurie basically surprises them, like,
It's like, you're dead. Which, again, is a bit of comedy, even though it's not supposed to be comedic. It was still, like, it was a funny moment. And then, Laurie's basically like, here, take the gun. And Karen's like, no! Like,
yep. Like, you got no security system. Things are going down. We need to hunt him now. And
Ray's like, I can take care of my family. And I'm like, can you? You were the one that spilled peanut butter on your penis earlier. I don't know if I can trust you.
Right. Talk about I took Taekwondo or something like that.
Yeah. He's like, I know Taekwondo.
Shit. Ray is so fucking funny. Oh, my God. And then, so, basically, they just write it off as Laurie's being crazy again, even though it's all over the news that fucking there's the bus crashed and all this shit, and they're hunting Michael now, and oh, that's when shit gets real, because then we get to Halloween night, and this is when trick-or-treaters are out, and this is where we get the long establishing shot of Michael going for his first kill back in Haddonfield since 1978.
Yeah, this was cool, because he ran into the kids, and then it basically became essentially a one-shot through each killing, which I thought was super cool, that it was just one camera, he'd do everything, and then show up.
Yep.
But we were watching the movie last night, and Isaiah said something, and I was just like, oh, what did you say? And he goes, oh, it's from the first movie. And I'm like, okay, yeah, what did you say? He's like, you have to watch this. It's like one of the best scenes in the movie. I'm like, I know what happens. I watched this twice now. What did you say? and he was like, no, watch it. And I was like, okay, fine. Because I have a really bad habit, extremely bad habit of I wouldn't say talking through movies. I'd say commenting through movies. And I've had past friends and current friends who get mad at me for speaking and will tell me to shut up. Have I learned after 27 years to do that? No. But did I turn my head and watch the movie after he said that? Yes, I did.
It's only like the coolest shot in the whole movie.
I know. So he starts walking up basically through this garage, because you see this mom with the curlers in her hair and like the long pink robe. Is just like, you can tell she's tired and just wants to go to sleep, carrying something. And he goes into the garage and picks up a hammer.
Yep.
And then you just kind of follow him into the house, and then she's making a sandwich.
Yep, which is a good callback to the second Halloween movie.
And then why? I mean, I know why it's there, but why she was using a big butcher knife to cut up like a teeny tiny little sandwich as a Midwestern who makes a sandwich, right? It's like, why did you do that? But what I really liked about this scene is obviously he goes in, and the entire attack of her with the hammer occurs off screen, which I thought was interesting because it's not his usual method of kill. And so in my brain, they did that on purpose to give the illusion of, okay, he's not like he's killing, but this isn't quite the Michael Myers that you're used to seeing. And then when you pick up the knife, every single murder after that, you actually get to see happen when it comes to using an actual weapon. Before it was just his hands, and he's used his hands, but with the weapon, they don't show the hammer, which I thought was interesting. But I also liked how they framed it with the table moving, the chair falling over, and then panning over her as he left.
Which fun fact, in the second Halloween movie, he actually does kill with a hammer.
Well, shit.
So, but we haven't gotten there yet.
There goes my theory.
We haven't gotten there yet. We still have to watch that one this year. So, but I wanted to get through this and Halloween Kills before we watch that. So,
fine. Well, in the continuum of only the first Halloween movie matter, in that case, he's never used a hammer.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. So we get that whole establishing shot of him killing basically 3 different people.
But after he killed that first person,
or 2 different people,
she had a baby, and he left the baby alone, which goes back to they never killed children, but he killed the teenager earlier. Anyway, I just went.
Yeah, because that was kind of because he like stopped at the baby and like, oh shit, is he about to kill a fucking infant? But no, he fucking kept walking on, which I'm like, oh, thank God, we don't need 2 children dying in this fucking movie.
Yep.
So that was a good call because it left you almost like in suspense there for a second, like, oh no. So that was interesting and a good call. So we have that happen, and then we've got the Halloween dance going on where Allison and Cameron are, and Cameron's getting hammered, and they've got their whole Bonnie and Clyde thing going on.
Which she pulled off the suit beautifully. Him not so much in the skirt. It just wasn't my cup of tea. She looked great.
Yep. And so that happens. They get into a huge fight because he's drunk and throws her fucking phone into the...
Well, that's because he kissed some other girl, and she witnessed it, and he was like, oh, that's nothing. And she's like, no, I can see the writing on the wall here. And she, like any good, smart, strong, independent female does, chucked her phone... Yeah, she chucked her phone in the... whatever. It was a drink, but it honest to God looked like pudding.
Yep.
Which was gross. And left her phone behind. It's just like, yeah, love it.
Because then you've also got their friend Oscar, who's kind of like
he's a third wheel.
He's the third wheel. He's kind of like the comedy relief. He's always trying to be like the guy that's trying to make everybody laugh, kind of thing. And he's in love with Allison, obviously, which we find out here shortly.
I mean, it's obvious,
right?
It's very obvious.
So. We've got, and then we've got Allison's friend, I forget her name, Vicky, who's babysitting little Julian, Julian
is so great.
Julian's the best character in this whole fucking
spot.
movie. I mean, Julian's lines in this movie are the best, and that's where the comedy really comes in. Just because he's kind of got this no-nonsense, like, I don't give a fuck kind of attitude.
Like, I'm sitting here clipping my toenails.
I'm sitting here clipping my nasty ass toenails.
I know you're talking about weed. No. It's like a magic trick. And he goes, I still know you're talking about smoking weed.
It's like, I'm gonna tell my mom. She's like, I'm gonna tell your mom about your browsers. Like, you better not.
So that was a good bit of banter. Again, it broke up what had all of the murder that you had just witnessed, and allowed your brain and allowed yourself to kind of relax a little bit more and be unaware of what again was about to happen.
Yep.
Because then shortly after Dave shows up.
Yep, Dave shows up and he's got a jack-o'-lantern carved and everything, and
he's got hearts for eyes. Like he was very proud of the fact that it had hearts for eyes.
Got himself a tattoo to commemorate the night, and he's like, I'm going to dry fuck you tonight.
No. Vicky says, you're so getting dry humped tonight or dry fucked tonight.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's what did it for you? Okay. All right. I mean, him showing up with weed and, being your boyfriend, I would have thought would have been a real good reason. But, a tattoo with the date really, really just sealed the deal on that one.
Yeah.
You go, Vicky. You do you.
Yep. And kind of while all this is going on, we also see Lori. No, that's afterwards. We'll come back to that. So we've got So that's all happening. Michael's lurking outside, and you can hear him breathing through the mask as he's watching the house and whatnot. And basically, Julian's got to go to bed before Dave shows up. And so she puts him to bed, and, Dave shows up, and they're talking. Julian comes downstairs and says, there's a man standing outside of my room with a weird-looking face just looking at me.
Yeah, so they were making out on the couch, and Vicky heard a noise, and then she said to Dave to go look at it, and that's when Dave ran into Julian, and Julian scared Dave running down, saying there was a man there.
Yep.
And I think even Julian's like, make Dave to go do it. Because again, we stand Julian. And Vicky walks up to his bedroom and pretends like she's talking. Very good acting, from her off screen. And then, pops up and is like, there's nothing here.
While all this is going on, Dave's in the garage looking at the motorcycle.
Trying to ride a motorcycle. And then he knocks it over, and I'm like, and he's struggling to pull it back up. And I'm just like, I've done that before, and getting a motorcycle back off his side is really hard.
Yep.
And if you're high, it's like 10 times harder because you're like, my muscles don't work. But then doesn't he hear Vicky? He hears Vicky scream, right?
Because she puts Julian back to bed, and then Julian's like, can you just shut the closet door?
Yeah.
Because the closet door has always been open this whole time. And she goes to close the closet door. Obviously, it's not shutting. She opens it up. Michael's there. And Julian jumps out, oh, shit, and runs down the stairs.
Oh, shit. Meanwhile, Vicky's getting slashed in her arm. She's trying to run, but she's wearing socks. And, of course, it's a modern home. It's a hardwood floor. She slips and falls onto the banister area out by the bedroom. And, Michael's still slashing at her. She's trying to grab at it. And that's when Dave hears her from the garage and runs in. And I think Julian said something along the line, you better run, Dave, you're going to die.
Yeah, something like that. But Dave ends up going to try to find Vicky and grabs the butcher knife, and that comes into play because we don't see his death. He ends up in the wall with that same knife.
Yep.
So that all happens. Julian ends up getting the cops called to his house, and Lori hears it and makes a U-turn as she's driving around patrolling Haddonfield, basically. And obviously Hawkins shows up, and Hawkins goes into the fucking house to explore, ends up seeing a ghost sitting in the chair, which is another callback to Halloween 1 with Bob wearing with the sheet as the ghost.
Oh, yeah.
So he pulls it off. Obviously, we see it's Vicky. At this time, Lori's in the streets telling everybody to get home. She looks up. She sees Hawkins in one room, looks over, sees Michael in the other room. And that's the scene that Nick Castle, the original person to play Michael Myers, played in this movie. Because he got to do a cameo in this movie. That's the scene he got to cameo in, besides doing the breathing. So all the breathing you hear in the movie is Nick Castle, the original Michael Myers.
That's cool.
Whereas that one scene, he actually got to wear the mask and the coveralls and play him. So Lori shoots at him. It ends up being a mirror that she shoots. Hawkins hears it, but then sees Michael walking and going down the stairs and shoots at him, yelling at him. They run. Hawkins and Lori end up running into each other, and she ends up hitting him.
Oh, that was so funny. First of all, don't go and walk up and scare Lori. That is bad. Bad advice number 1. Don't do that. But he just goes, Lori, and she just whips the pistol around and he gets pistol whipped, smacked in the head, and it was so funny.
Yep. So that was nice because then we also get the meetup where Lori's with the police then with Hawkins and kind of the sheriff, and Dr. Sartain shows up, and basically she's like, you're the new Loomis. To kind of establish that he's supposed to be the new Dr. Loomis in this movie, basically. Even though it was kind of already established that because he was the student of Dr. Loomis and all this. So,
yeah, but by having her say it though, it established it even deeper.
Yep.
Than just us knowing right off the bat. Oh, okay, he took over for Loomis. Like that, I feel like added another depth to the storyline.
Yep.
Just by her stating that fact.
Yep, for sure. And so that that all happens, but also we have Allison and Oscar walking home, and they're because ultimately what they're trying to do is they're trying to get everybody into their homes. They're also trying to get Karen and her family out of that house, and they're trying to reach Allison, but they can't because her fucking phone is basically destroyed. So Allison and Oscar are walking, and they decide to take a shortcut through somebody's yard, Mr. Elrod's yard, which is a callback to Halloween 2, because the Elrods are the old folks that Michael ends up stealing the butcher knife from in the beginning of that movie. So they decide to cut through the yard, and they've got motion sensor lights.
And this is where you find out that Oscar is really in love with Allison, because he helps her jump down.
Yep.
And then, very smoothly, even though he is drunk, very smoothly, kind of backs up into a wall, but she's just like, excuse me, what are you doing? Tries to kiss her, and she's just like, no thank you, pushes him off. And he's like, I'm so sorry. First of all, he says, don't tell Cameron. I'm like, okay, cool. Yep, all right, we've already got a strike against you now, Oscar. You should have said I'm sorry to her first. But then they basically have an argument. Allison's like, no, I'm going to go home, la-di-da-di-da. Yep. But Oscar's trying to run. I think he falls. He's like, I'm drunk. I had girls up all on top of me. Basically, it was it was really, there was a cut shot of him with all the cheerleaders dancing around. Yep. And so basically it was like, I had all these girls up on top of me, and I didn't know what to do. And I got a hard on essentially. He's like, I was just drunk. And, the lights come back on because he freaked out because of the motion lights at first. That was one of the good things that Allison said. She's walking away, motion lights, idiot, and it just flips him off as she's walking away. Again, power trip of independent woman, which made me happy.
Yeah. Then you, as the motion lights are on, you see Michael behind him, kind of in the shadows, and he turns around and sees him and thinks it's Mr. Elrod and just says, "Happy Halloween. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to cut through your yard."
And the lights go out. They come back on. He's not there anymore, but he's standing kind of in front of him, but it's still a distance away. They go out again, and he's right there, and he slashes at him. Makes Oscar run, try to climb the fence, but he can't. He ends up slipping, ends up getting stabbed. His fucking jaw right through the fucking
wrought
pole.
Iron fence.
Yep. And that was because he's yelling for Allison, and Allison's just not having any of it. And finally, because he's screaming, she comes back, and then the lights come on. She sees his body, and then Michael steps out of the shadows, and that just was enough.
She just runs and just gets her ass out of there.
Yep. So that all happens. She ends up being picked up by Hawkins and Sartain, and they're making rounds trying to find Michael because basically Karen and Lori and Ray are back at Lori's house to be protected, and they've got cops there watching them. And so they're around trying to find Myers because they're trying to stop him. And they find him. Hawkins runs right the fuck into him with his fucking Suburban and just runs that motherfucker over. And he gets out to check him to see if he's dead, and Sartain is checking him too, and Hawkins wants to shoot him right then and there and just end this whole thing.
And Sartain's like, no, you can't do that, da-da-da-da. This was one of the better scenes in the entire movie too, because this was, when I first watched it, this was not a twist I was expecting during this scene at all.
Yeah, because he basically pulls out his pen and pulls out basically a scalpel and just slices him right open, and ends up taking him down. That's when you realize, oh shit, he's the reason why Michael escaped. And basically, Sartain's thinking was he wanted to see him in the wild to see how he would react and whatnot. And he's basically trying to pass it off as he's trying to do this for the greater good, and trying to know more about why Michael is the way that he is. But he needed to see him hunt basically out in the wild to get a better understanding of him.
Well, isn't this a scene too where Sartain took his mask off and put the mask on himself and just threw Michael into the back seat with Allison? So here's an injured Mike Myers next to Allison, who's already freaking out enough, and then you have Sartain, who's just like, I'm gonna put the mask on now. I am Michael.
Right.
It's like, I am the captain now.
So yeah, he drags Michael and puts him in the
and he's already injured too. Sartain has only one use of one arm because he was shot in the upper left shoulder.
Yep. and somehow he's dragging Michael's fucking lanky, tall ass and putting him in the back seat all by himself, and then throws the mask, back there with them and whatnot, and gets in the car, runs fucking Hawkins over.
Yeah, that was fun.
And, essentially is supposed to kill him. But that all changes because fans wanted Hawkins back because he was such a great part of the fucking movie.
He was.
He really was. It was kind of a mistake. If there was one mistake, was them basically trying to write him off and kill him in that scene. So, anyways, back to this. So we got Sartain driving, and basically Allison's trying to get him to let her go. And, basically says that because Michael obviously hasn't spoken a word since he was 6 or whatever the case may be. And Allison basically pulls the card of like, well, he spoke to me. And Sartain's like, what did he say?
Well, stop the car and I'll tell you.
Let me out and I will tell you everything. And, well, yeah, Michael has come to at this point. And they're stopped just a little bit away from Laurie's house.
And there's a pair of cops sitting outside of Laurie's house, like doing patrol. So they can see this car coming, and all of a sudden it stops because they think it's Hawkins.
Yep, because it's Hawkins' vehicle. And, they're having their little banter about sandwiches.
Oh my God, that
was... And one of them was Christopher Nelson, who did the special effects for the movie, which is fucking awesome. He's one of the nicest dudes ever, and he's just really fucking cool.
Having a conversation about banh mi.
Yep.
Which was so great.
It was fucking awesome. And so you have that going on while the whole thing in Hawkins' vehicle is going on, and Michael comes to, ends up breaking through the fucking barrier, and, ends up dragging Sartain out of the fucking vehicle. And at this point, Allison was able to finally get out of the vehicle. Michael ends up stomping Sartain's head, and that was
satisfying.
Fucking satisfying. So graphic, so good though. I mean, just showing the strength of Michael, just squashing his head like a fucking watermelon, and just brains and everything just all over the fucking concrete. And so Allison gets away and runs through the woods, but Michael sees her obviously. But then, the
other cops started driving up at that point.
Yep, they did. And then you don't see what happens to them. So we've got everything kind of going on at, Laurie's house, and, Karen's like sitting in one of the rooms and just kind of almost distraught and whatnot. And
isn't she in her bedroom? She's in her childhood bedroom, and she's looking at like the picture and the dollhouse.
Yep.
And basically just like zoned out.
Yep, and so while that's all going on and they're talking, Ray is watching outside, and the cop car shows up, and he goes out to talk to them and thinking maybe they finally brought Allison. Well, obviously we see it's the dead cops, and, the one cop's head is on a flashlight to make a jack-o'-lantern, and Michael shows up and kills Ray. Laurie sees this and ends up locking down the house at that point then, and telling Karen to get down into the basement. And then that's when Michael breaks through the window, by the door, and grabs Laurie. Laurie's got the shotgun and blows half his fucking hand off, which is
that was cool.
A cool visual. And, you've got all that going on, and then because Laurie ends up going downstairs then too, and then they shut the thing while Michael comes through and is walking around trying to figure out where she went.
Yeah, that I have to admit, like when in horror films specifically, where they have that moment of, the killer is like in a different room or downstairs, and like they're hiding, and like you can see like when he's walking across the floorboards, the dirt and like all that stuff falling down.
Yep.
And so like that I feel like was just a good attribution to just general horror. Again, as a person who's really seen horror before, it's like I recognize that as like a trope thing. It's like, oh, okay, cool. But yeah, because they're down in the basement for quite a bit before Allison actually shows up.
Yep, because that's all going on, but then Laurie ends up going back up to try to find Michael.
That's what it was. Okay.
Because
I fell asleep when we were watching this part last night, so I'm trying to remember from the first time I watched it.
So, way to call yourself out there. I love it.
I will gladly do. I'll always call myself out.
So anyway, so Laurie ends up going up to try to find Michael, and Michael's obviously at this point hiding and waiting for Laurie to attack her. So she's going room by room, checking each room, and she's installed these drop-down doors.
Yeah.
To basically, so every time she checks a room, and once she sees that it's clear, she'll drop those fucking doors that you can't get in or out of then. And then she ends up going into the final room upstairs. And this is a direct recreation of the bedroom from the first Halloween where Michael attacks her in. And it's right down to everything is the exact same. And it's filled with mannequins now though, but it's got the closet. It's got the door leading out to the balcony that, Michael falls out during the first movie. So that was a nice little homage because originally they were talking about using that also to recreate the last scene of the first Halloween movie, but change it slightly to fit how they're doing the narrative for this movie. But they didn't end up doing that. They decided it was going to be a bad idea to do that. So they repurposed it for that and just kind of an homage then. So she's checking that room. She finds Ray in this room.
Which I thought was a very reminiscent of, I forget the boyfriend's name from the very first movie.
Bob.
Bob. When he came swinging out, I was like, oh, it's the husband of her daughter, swinging out. So I thought that was just a good connection back to that too.
Yep. And then Michael ends up coming out and attacking, and they're fighting over the gun and whatnot. And Michael ends up taking Laurie out and throwing her basically over the balcony. And then he's looking down at her as she's laying on the ground, very reminiscent of the very first movie. And then Michael hears Allison come in at this point because she's finally come through. And then he looks back out and sees that Laurie's now gone, just like he did in the first movie.
Where'd you go?
Yep. And so Allison ends up getting down in the basement, and they're waiting, and Laurie's nowhere to be seen, so Michael's kind of searching. And, at this point, he ends up ripping open the thing.
Yeah.
And they're just waiting for him to come down. And Karen's crying like, I can't do this. I can't do this. Michael shows up. He's like, gotcha.
Oh my God. Yes. I loved that a lot. Just because it showed that she finally realized that what her mom had taught her was, while at the time when she was a child, probably not the greatest thing, but really was what she needed. And It kind of was just like, I am as strong as my mom type of thing. So I love that. That was again, it was also funny.
Yep.
But it was also like,
Yep. Because then she ends up shooting Michael, but then Laurie's behind him and comes out of the shadows and like, happy Halloween, stabs his ass, and his ass falls down the fucking stairs.
Yep.
So then they end up getting out, and they end up trapping him inside because they've got these bars that just end up coming across. And then Karen then basically explains that this house is basically a trap for him. And
it's not a jail, it's a trap.
Yep, it's not a jail, it's a trap. And so Laurie turns on the gas, throws down the fucking flare, and then basically they just watch as Mike the whole basement just starts ablaze.
And he's just
staring. Which is very fucking creepy still, because he's like, you motherfuckers. He's like, if I can find a way out of here, I'm going to fucking kill you.
Yeah.
And so that all happens. They get out, and the house is just set ablaze, and you basically expect Michael to be dead at this point. But obviously we're getting sequels, so that's all coming. And
if you've seen the trailer,
you know he gets out.
You see that he walks out of the house.
Yes. So... But that's kind of in essence a wrap up of Halloween 2018. Honestly, for me, it's my favorite Halloween sequel. I fucking love this movie so much, and it beats out Halloween 2, which was my original favorite Halloween sequel. It's still high up there. It's almost right there with 2018. But 2018, oh my God, they just did everything right with this movie, in my opinion. So with that being said, if you were to rate this movie out of 5, 1 being like, this is a shitty movie that I never want to see again, and 5 being like, this is fucking excellent. What would you rate this movie?
I'd probably give it a 4. Just because, like you said, there were some things that they probably could have done better, or maybe expand upon something a little bit more than what they did. But I thought it was solid. I mean, I've watched it twice now, and both times I've watched it, I've like, I noticed something different, whereas that's hard for me in most movies because I'm a serial rewatcher, so I'll just watch the same 5 things over and over and over again. And so being introduced to these now, it's in comparison to the first one, way better.
Yep.
Way better. I don't know if I'd watch the original Halloween one again unless it was like in a movie theater for a special night or something. It wouldn't be something I would actively go seek. But I would rewatch this one, every year probably.
Yeah. Definitely. And yeah, for me, this one is an easy 5 out of 5. It's such a good movie, and I fucking love it. And I love it almost as much as the original Halloween, even though I know it's not one that you're particularly.
I just need to rewatch it more. I think that's just it. Because we watched it once, I was like, okay. I was also tired when we watched it the first time, so that could have played into it too.
I mean, it could have been, but definitely for me, it's 5 out of 5. It's got everything that I want from a movie, and as a movie-going experience, this was probably one of the best movies I saw in the movie theater, like for experience-wise, just with crowd reactions and everything, and it was special being able to see this in the movie theater, just like it was, getting the chance to see the original Halloween in the theaters, or even like the original Nightmare on Elm Street, getting to see that in the theaters. I mean, this was definitely an experience, and I went and saw this movie 3 times in the theaters. Like, I enjoyed it that much. It was fucking phenomenal. So, but I would also love to know what you guys think of this movie. Did you like this movie? Did you hate it? Just as with any of the other Halloween movies that we've talked about over the last few months, let me know. You can reach out through our social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all at CLS Podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed this week's show, as we're getting close to wrapping up the Halloween Retrospective series. Next week, we'll be wrapping up with Halloween Kills and reviewing that. So be aware.
Guess what? I'll be back.
Yep.
So if you didn't like today's episode, I guess skip over the next one too.
But be ready. There will more than likely be spoilers as we talk about the movie. So just be aware of that, and you might want to see the movie first before listening next week, but that will be up next Monday as well at 8 a.m. sharp, so be on the lookout for that. But otherwise, thanks again for tuning in this week. We'll see you guys next week.
This episode of the Crystal Lake Soldiers podcast is brought to you by the Slash and Cast Podcast Network. Check us out at www.clspodcast.com. or join in the conversation on social media. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all at CLS Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, campers.